Emma Farrelly was first diagnosed with lupus in 2008 when she began suffering from joint pain, tiredness and developed breakouts on her face. But these symptoms were just the beginning of Emma's journey with the autoimmune disease.
Just 8 months after her diagnosis, Emma woke up in the middle of the night to what she described as a scene from a horror movie.
I went to bed that night, was putting it down to grief because my dad was only dead 3 weeks at that stage, so went to bed and went to sleep, and literally 5 o'clock in the morning I woke up. I knew there was wetness on me. I thought it was sweat though. Went into the bathroom and suddenly noticed that there was blood coming out everywhere. So from my eyes, from my gums, from my mouth, and then when I looked at my hands, it was coming out through my fingernails. So it was only when I went back into my bedroom I noticed then that there was blood all over the bed and all over the floor. I actually thought I was dying, yeah. When I looked at my body then, it was all little bruises. It looked like little bruises all over my body. It was actually clots of blood just trying to push the way up through the skin. That was what's called TTP. So it was a side effect of lupus. Now it's a very, very rare side effect of lupus, but basically the clotting agents in your blood died. The plasma in my blood completely died, and that there was no agents to make my blood run as it should, so they just all completely started to clot.
We'd like to welcome Emma and Jessica to the Morning Show studios. Now, you're both very welcome. Thank you for coming in. We have to point out, Emma, that this is quite an extreme case, because normally a typical lupus sufferer wouldn't have what you had. That was quite a scary ordeal.
Oh, it was, yeah, it was. You know, completely very, very frightening at the time.
Who else was in the house with you at that stage?
I was still living at home at the time, so it was just myself, my mum and my sister were at home at the time. Yeah, and it was literally like what you were saying, Sybil. It really was like out of a scene, out of a horror movie.
So you went straight to the hospital then?
Yeah.
Who took you there?
My mum took me in the car over to the hospital. We went over to just the local hospital, and they quickly realised that they weren't equipped to deal with me there, so I had to be transferred up to one of the main hospitals in Dublin then, you know, a couple of days later. So,
and the doctors were quite baffled. You had told them that you had lupus, because at that stage you'd been diagnosed with lupus. And just before we get into these other symptoms, you know, what is lupus exactly? Like, what are the symptoms of it?
Yeah, lupus is an autoimmune disease where basically your immune system attacks the healthy tissues and joints in your body. So in most cases people would have, you know, joints, swelling of the joints, very bad pains in the joints, headaches and chronic fatigue as well. So they would be generally the main symptoms of lupus.
So all this blood that's coming out of your nose and your mouth and your fingernails, that was from this TTP, which is quite rare.
Yeah, that's a very, very rare side effect of lupus. So it's not too common here in this country. It would mostly, you know, a lot of people in America, would be much more higher cases in America as well, but very, very rare over here, which is why they kind of were thinking then in the end, maybe it isn't lupus, because it is so rare to have TTP as a side effect of lupus as well.
But once you got over that episode of TTP, you actually ended up back in hospital several months later, having brain seizures. And was that because of lupus?
It was. So what happened in that case then was that I had gradually gone back to work full time. All of a sudden, 8 months later, I started feeling unwell again, very similar to the time before. Sick stomach, very, very tired. I actually felt like my wrists were broken in occasions as well, so my joints had gone so bad then. And what happened then, I went back into hospital, spent a week in hospital as well. The doctors came back and said, well, look, you know, it could be lupus again, you know, it could be flaring its head again. So basically, literally overnight in hospital, my kidneys went into complete failure, shut down completely, which ended up, the brain seizures happened then as well.
Okay. Was it around this time when chemotherapy was suggested?
Yeah, it was. And
that came as a real shock to you.
It was a massive, massive shock, because I always thought, you know, chemotherapy is really only to treat cancer. I had never heard of being treated for any kind of kidney disease at all. So basically the lupus thought that my kidneys were a massive infection in my body, and to try and get rid of my kidneys, they just shut my kidneys down completely. So my blood pressure went up into the extremely high hundreds, which caused the